You know, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
Not too long ago, it wouldn't have seemed strange for an American president to call himself a nationalist. Lincoln was a nationalist, so was Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, all very successful presidents. But this president's critics say it's not just wrong to call yourself a nationalist, it's immoral. And the French president agrees, Emmanuel Macron, who, by the way, has copied the style and, to some extent, the substance of Charles de Gaulle, a nationalist French president. But whatever, he attacked Trump by bashing nationalism. Why has this become a theme? Putting your own country first is not allowed. We'd like to get to the bottom of it. Jim Kessler is Senior Vice President for Policy at Third Way, and he joins us tonight. Jim, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
So, sincere question. So, nationalism, there have been people who've claimed the title of nationalist who've had all kinds of creepy agendas that normal people, including me, would disavow, of course.
Absolutely.
But strictly speaking, the definition seems a common sense one. A leader of a nation state puts the interests of that state above the interests of other states. Why is that bad?
Of course. I mean, of course, a leader is going to put the interests of their own country ahead of others. That's not nationalism. Nationalism is a loaded term. I mean, the definition of patriotism is I love my country, and nationalism is I hate your country. That's what it certainly has become.
Really? When did it become that? I'm like, who came up with the idea that that's the definition? I missed that.
Well, the definition of nationalism, especially when you're in the European context where President Trump made that statement, is the nationalism that engulfed Europe in the 1920s and 1930s. The Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party, that's the N for Nazi, is there.
Okay.
And that's loaded, and he knows that.
But hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Gandhi was a nationalist, okay? So the leaders of almost every nation state in history, up until about 20 minutes ago, would describe themselves, and did, as nationalists. So I get what you're saying, but it seems a little too glib and pretty unfair. Let's address the substance of it. So we have all kinds of multilateral agreements with other countries. A nationalist would look at those agreements and say, I want to make sure that my country doesn't get hurt in this agreement.
Absolutely.
The Kyoto Accord, for example.
Yes.
But that's not the way that our leaders who benefit from a borderless world, the finance community, for example, which has gotten so rich, doesn't benefit from that, and so they attack the idea of the nation state. Why would it be wrong to push back and say, no, the United States shouldn't get shafted?
Oh, of course. Look, if the definition of nationalism was Gandhi's nationalism, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
It was American nationalism, Roosevelt's nationalism.
Ronald Reagan never used the term nationalist. He used the term patriotism. And especially Donald Trump is using this as a weapon. He's using this as separating this
separating
nation.
Who? I don't know. From other nations? Why would that be bad?
So, certainly in the European context, everyone knows that nationalism is what led to the rise of Nazi Germany. And when he says that the French are nationalists,
throwing the Nazi thing out again. But hold on,
well, that's where he did it.
No, he did it also in this country, and I'm doing it here because I think it's important to have an adult conversation.
Sure.
Not one where you win by innuendo. Oh, the N in Nazi is national. Okay, fine. But sincerely, I don't understand why the average person living in any nation state wouldn't want his leaders to put his interests above those of other countries. And we don't. Consistently, we don't. Well, and I can give you 10 examples, and you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And look, of course you want your leaders to put the interests of your nation ahead of others. That's what nationalism is not that. Nationalism is basically saying our country is always right. There are other countries, they are always wrong, and it is to separate us from other countries, and he is using that term as a weapon. His strategy is always to divide and conquer, and that's what he's trying to do with nationalism.
Okay, but I guess that you're coming at this believing that all countries must be united somehow.
No, there are countries, of course, are going to have conflict.
But what unites Americans? So if not a shared loyalty to the country they live in.
Melting pot, national identity.
Right.
Those are important things.
Well, but what would be more important than that? Like, so what does hold this country that doesn't have a common race or religion or history? And that's all fine as far as I'm concerned. But what does hold us together, if not nationalism?
A common set of ideals and belief in democracy, and a belief in pluralism, and a belief in the American dream and being inclusive. And I think those are the American values, and those are not nationalist values.
Well,
nationalist values are basically separating into sort of the in-group in this country and the out-group in this country.
But maybe you're misunderstanding the term. So nationalism, by definition, includes everyone within the nation. It does not exclude fellow American citizens. It unites them. And at a time when the left is hell-bent, as you know, on dividing us by race, which is the basis.
I disagree with that.
Well, no, but identity politics is the whole concept is we owe our first allegiance to our tribe,
so
and that's obviously
I am a melting pot.
And amen. I knew you were. Good for you. And we agree on that, certainly. But at a time when we are divided by tribe, why wouldn't nationalism be the answer to that? We're all in it because we're Americans.
So here's my question then. Ronald Reagan wouldn't say it. George H.W. Bush wouldn't say it. Bill Clinton wouldn't say it. George W. Bush wouldn't say it. And Barack Obama wouldn't say it. But President Trump said that, and he said it in a European context.
That's the argument? That Bill Clinton and George W. Bush wouldn't say it?
And Ronald Reagan wouldn't say it.
You're not winning me over.
Well,
that's not an argument.
Because you don't want. Okay, it's an observation. Because that word is now a loaded term based on what happened in the 1920s and 30s, and you know it. Nationalism is not the benign, Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln nationalism.
Let's reclaim that word, because it's been 80 years, and we defeated the Nazis. Americans died to defeat them.
Yes,
we
defeated nationalist socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis.
We defeated the Nazis,
yes.
And that has nothing to do with what we're trying to do now, which is.
So do you think when Donald Trump was talking about nationalism in France and to Macron, he didn't know what he was doing and referring to the nationalist uprising in 20s and 30s?
Himself a nationalist, whatever. We're out of time. I hope you'll come back, because I think it's an interesting.
I would love to.
Conversation. Thank you.